Sitchin Chronicles.
Good evening, everyone. I have been streaming for 15 minutes and didn't click the go live button. So all the best things that I was going to say, they were perfect. I'm sorry you missed it. So I'm going to start over here again. And at least I got to practice a little bit, I guess. So this is my first video broadcast as far as a live one. And I'm kind of nervous. I'm a behind the camera guy. I'm not a in front of the camera guy. So I'm just we'll see what happens during this pandemic. I'm trying to spend a lot of this downtime getting the word out. I wanted to update a lot of people who've been asking questions about the documentary, and to let you know that everything's been it's been going great. I'm going to get into some details in a few minutes, and I'm not going to watch the numbers as to how many people are watching. Not going to chat. Got a moderator on here who's going to post a couple of links whenever I talk about something. But other than that, I'm just going to sit here and talk to you and try to remember all the things that I wanted to say. Tonight's episode, I'm calling it, yeah, but at least Sitchin didn't get his arm yanked out of its socket. And I will go more into that title in just a second. I want to talk to you, and I want to introduce Zecharia Sitchin first of all, because a lot of my friends, they have no idea who he is, and I'm just going to do a brief overview. Zecharia Sitchin, he was born in 1920. He passed away in 2010, and on July 11th, that will be his 100th birthday. He passed away at 90 years old. He was born in Baku, which was in the Soviet Socialist Republic, and right before he was born, the Red Army had attacked, and there became a lot of Jewish persecution and things that didn't make it very fun for Sitchin's parents to live there. So in 1922, 25, because the persecution was getting so severe, where the Red Army would come in and take belongings from the Jews that lived there. Seems to be a recurring pattern. The parents packed up Sitchin and they moved to Palestine. Palestine was becoming a haven at the time, thanks to the Zionist movement, and that was the promised land, the land that had already belonged to the Jews at the time. So it was time to go back, try to reclaim that. And at the time, as Sitchin was growing up, of course, he was living there. There were Arabs and there were Jews, not always in harmony. Don't know if that's ever happened or not, but maybe. And Sitchin, at about the age of 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, he's iffy on those ages when you hear him lecture. So we're going to say he was 8. And he was in a class. They were studying their Hebrew. And as the story goes, which has become legend now, they were studying Genesis 6, and the word Nephilim popped up. And, it had been translated as giants. In those days, there were giants upon the earth. And Sitchin raised his hand and he said, my teacher, that word doesn't mean I don't think you know what that word means. And he, he said that Nephilim was not about giants, but it means those who from heaven to earth came. And the teacher immediately shut him down and told him to stop asking questions, stop questioning the Bible, and from that moment on, Sitchin became obsessed. So he started learning a lot of he had taken Arabic, he had taken started learning a lot of different languages. Because he was, as a kid, there were, especially around the time, there were a couple of archaeological digs going on. So he would visit those digs as he was, a young man. But still, at the same time, he was trying to get to the bottom of this Nephilim business, as he would say. And at this point, he started frequenting libraries. He started reading everything he could get his hands on, and ended up being kind of pointed in the direction of the Sumerian cuneiform tablets. And at the time when his books came out, he was just one of a couple hundred of people on Earth who could actually translate that. So after researching for about 30 years, I'm skipping a large part of his life because those are things that I'm not going to divulge yet. But he was in New York, and he worked as in the shipping industry, but that's what the Wikipedia says. But he was actually, and it goes back just a little bit, but he was the director of the Israel Chamber of Commerce. So he was instrumental in the trade that was going between the U.S. and Israel. There was a lot of products. I know when I was a kid, you could find things a lot that would say made in Israel. I don't see that much anymore, but I just had to kind of make that connection. After 30 years of researching and talking about it all the time, his wife, Rena, said, "Hey, why don't you just stop talking about it and write the book?" And so he did. Out of that, we got The 12th Planet. It was published in 1976 by Stein and Day, and it became a huge hit. And what Sitchin proposed was that, based on these ancient Sumerian texts, that a planet that has an elliptical orbit around the sun only comes in the presence of it only circles Earth about every 3,600 years, and he had figured out that there were a lot of different things that had happened. Perhaps the dinosaurs dying could have been on one of those rotations. The flood, that's kind of the big thing. And he really, really, really gets deep into studying, especially a lot of the Bible stories, because as you may or may not know, most of the all of the Old Testament stories originated from those original Sumerian tablets. So there's the story of Moses and Noah and the flood. They're different names. Their names have been changed to I didn't even want to say that cliche. So anyway, but everything originated from these. So Sitchin, over the next 25, 35 years, he ended up writing about 14 books. There were 7 of those books that comprised the collection known as the Earth Chronicles, and that included The 12th Planet in 1976, Stairway to Heaven in 1980. I don't know if he took that name from Led Zeppelin or not. I cannot see Sitchin being a Zeppelin fan, but I'm finding a lot of surprising things, and he might just have been. Third book came out in 1985. It was called The Wars of God and Men. 1990, he followed up with The Lost Realms, and 1993, When Time Began. 1998, The Cosmic Code, and he had spoken years before, and he said when he finally finishes these books that the last book would deal with the end of days. And that is what the book is called, The End of Days, Armageddon, and Prophecies of the Return. And when you talk about the return, he is talking about the return of the Anunnaki, or those who from heaven to earth came. What I want to do, and also there were several books that followed up, but most of you are probably Sitchin fans anyway, and you've probably read them over and over. Next thing I want to do is my weekly update. And because this is the first episode, because this is the first episode, I just want to talk about where I am up until now. I've done so much research. I have put together over 300 pages of notes. I'm now beginning to sort all of that stuff out and set it up chronologically. At the same time, I've been getting really lucky in acquiring new footage. Some footage that has never been seen before, even in high def, 720p, which has amazing clarity and audio. Then there's those old videos, the ones that you've seen, you've probably downloaded, listened to them. They're hard to hear. I'm looking at those too, and those are absolutely amazing historical documents in as far as I'm concerned. What I started doing was trying to track down a lot of these videos to find out who owned it. And it's funny how you can find 15 people who own the same video, only to realize that none of them owned it. And then I actually ran into a person who owned the footage and gave me permission. And this happened in several instances. So while I'm talking about that, so some of the footage out there I've purchased. Some has been donated, and so I want to give some thanks. One is the Steven Spielberg Jewish Film Archive. They have this amazing collection of a lot of that early settlements in Palestine, and I was just kind of blown away because as I look and find addresses of where the Sitchin lived, and actually finding areas that were very, very close to where Sitchin grew up, because I'm trying to be as detailed as possible. Maureen Milton, she's a producer, and she and her husband videotaped Sitchin in front of this really neat blue backdrop, and asked him to basically summarize each of his books. So I have that. That's in HD, and I am tickled to death over that one. It's beautiful. Italian superstar Susie Blatti, who has had a long career in the entertainment industry in Italy. She was in New York, and someone said, "Hey, do you know Zecharia Sitchin lives down the road?" She ended up getting in touch with him, and Sitchin allowed her and her interpreter and videographer to go inside his apartment. There's 45 minutes or so of him explaining everything to her. So we have almost a one-on-one collection of videos. We've even got a great video of Sitchin trying to make the elevator work in his apartment building, which is priceless. Suzanne Dochet, I think you say your name, Dochet. She is the owner of NewAgeMusic.com. She's on the Academy for the Grammys, and she's a singer, a legend in the New Age music category, and I really, really thank her. She and her husband shot a video interview of Sitchin, and I think it was it might have been a Conscious Life Expo, and he was talking about the book The End of Days. And Guido Hugenboom, who we've seen here and there, he's from the Netherlands, and he does a lot of documentaries and interviews, and I'm trying to get in touch with him. I've tried every way. If anybody knows where he is, I would love to know, because I'd love to talk to him. Next, I want to thank Corey Kilgannon from the New York Times. Before Sitchin's death, about 8 months before his death, Corey, who lived in the neighborhood there on East 82nd Street in New York, that was his neighbor, and he kind of heard, hey, this guy's like into aliens and things like this. So he didn't know a thing about him, but he ended up taking a cameraman in, interviewing Sitchin. We have him in the apartment. We have him at a restaurant with grits on his face, which is beautiful again. We have him getting a haircut. And again, precious footage of Mr. Sitchin. So I want to thank Corey for that. And then Ronald James of MUFON Television. You guys probably know him. If you keep up with that station, you can check it out at MUFONtelevision.com. So now I'm going to do something totally unrelated. I am I'm a Bill Cooper fan, and I didn't listen to Bill Cooper on the radio, but I had heard and seen videos and things like that. And Mark Jacobson, he's a New York-based journalist, and he was a writer for the Village Voice during the 70s. He wrote for New York Magazine and Rolling Stone, and a lot of different publications. He has a couple of books, The Lampshade and Gojiro, and also some of his journalism articles that he had written served as the source material for the movie American Gangster and the TV show Taxi. So anyway, and of course, Bill Cooper, the king of all conspiracy theorists. He lived from 1943 until he was shot dead by the government in 2001, and on his front porch, by the way. So there should be a link to a really neat Mark Jacobson video, and you click on it, check it out, and read that book. It's extremely well written, very literary, and has some really neat parts to it. And of course, this book goes without saying. Behold a Pale Horse was written by William Cooper, and it's, you name it, it's in here. I just found out it is one of the most stolen books from Barnes & Noble. So if you want it, you have to go to the counter and ask for it. Why is that? Well, because when you're in prison and you're a black man, everything in this book makes sense. So it has been referenced in rap songs. It has been, I've seen these amazing pictures of this book in tatters, where it's actually, just falling apart, because one prisoner, as he finishes it, he gives it to the next prisoner. And it actually has helped people along the way, even to rehabilitate them and to give kind of a purpose to their life. So I'm not saying it's an inspirational book, but I'm saying it's a book that's a lot of fun. So check out that link if it's on there. Now, I want to, it's funny, my wife just brought our dogs down here, and for people who follow Sitchin, there's one name that always comes up, and that is that of Mike Heiser. And Heiser, back even while Sitchin was alive, came up with this website, sitchiniswrong.com or org, whatever it is. And he's kind of the antagonist of this whole thing, because he's just kind of he's somebody that says, oh, everything that Sitchin said was wrong. He didn't speak the languages. He didn't know all of this stuff. This guy, I think, went to school in Wisconsin and became a Bible scholar, and thus was able to, in just a couple of years, because I think his first piece on Sitchin was while he was still in college. So just a few years in college, and he became an expert, much better than Sitchin, in his opinion. So, and he's made a living by being that kind of person. He's a ghost hunter and a demon hunter. He's a Cotton Mather. I like to compare him to Cotton Mather. That's one of my favorite bad guys in literature. But the reason I brought this up, as I was trolling Mr. Heiser, I realized that he was a lover of pugs. I have tried over and over to get him to communicate with me. I want to interview him for the documentary. I think it would be really good to have his point of view, totally unbiased. I mean, not unbiased. I'm a Sitchin, and I don't believe some of the things that he says. But I have bait, so I've decided that I'm going to entice Mr. Heiser to be a friend of mine, because I have a pug. This is Doug the pug. He looks like a fat slug. Say hey. And then this is Dutch. You want to hold him up here? There's Dutch. So we have two pugs. They're brothers. This was the big one, and this one was the runt. And we've had them for about a year and a half. So, all right. Go away, Doug. Thank you. So, I am going to spend a little bit talking about myself, and not to be arrogant, but to let you know who is actually making this documentary, why I'm making the documentary, and am I even qualified to make it? So that's what I'm going to talk about right now. And I'm sorry I'm drinking all this water. I'm just so thirsty. I'm married. I've been married for 20 years in June. I've got two boys, aged 12 and 17. I met my wife just north of San Francisco in Novato, California, at a software company called Mindscape. I was the web manager there, and she was a producer, associate producer on the American Greetings software, and I think what is that one? Print Shop Deluxe. Remember that one? So she was one of the producers on that. And if you've ever played the Chessmaster games, she was your opponent, Jade. Yeah, the little Korean girl. So that's my wife. She's little and she's very bossy. She and I run a web development firm together. It's imageforge.com, imgforge.com. We've had that design firm for about 15 years now, and still going strong. It's just, we do web development, we do search engine optimization, video production, you name it. I grew up in Northeast Alabama, and 12 miles from Anniston, Alabama, where the Freedom Riders bus was burned. I gotta connect it somehow. Fort McClellan, for any of you military folks out there, Fort McClellan was where the Chemical Corps was, and the MP school. And Clinton closed that down, 98 or so, and kind of turned it into a much smaller place than it was. I went to school at Jacksonville State University there in Jacksonville, Alabama, and majored in drama and English. And right after high school, I went to work for Disney MGM Studios as a pyrotechnician, stage tech, lighting, sound, all those things. I hurt my back. I ruptured 2 discs in my back, and I had to take almost a year off. And during that time, I moved out to San Francisco, fell in love with it, and was there for 20 years. During the time that I was hurt, I went back and I learned 3D animation, compositing video, a lot of different video disciplines. And I'm sorry I say so much, but I ended up working, doing the whole .com thing, where we were working for a lot of different startups, and we would see one rise and we'd see one fall, and it was an amazing experience. I kind of, especially in the 2000s there, it was kind of like I would guess living in San Francisco, in 1967. It was just this amazing energy. I got married and we had our son, and then I ended up moving. We all ended up moving to Portland, Oregon. We lived there for a while, and then we started our business. And for some reason, my wife wanted to move back to Alabama. We did that, and now we're in Indianapolis because that's where her family is. So that's kind of me in a nutshell. But how is it that I became a Sitchin fan, which is short for fanatic? And I do feel like I'm a fanatic. I've read the books. I have no idea how many times. The only books that I've read more than Sitchin's books are the Lord of the Rings trilogy, and that's a lot. But I learned about ancient astronauts in church, and they weren't saying good things about them. I grew up in a Pentecostal holiness church, and if you don't know what that is, it's kind of in between Southern Baptist, strict Southern Baptist, and the snake handlers down in Florida. So, the shouting, speaking in tongues, that type of thing. Very, very strict. Everything was wrong. No matter if it seemed to be fun, it was probably wrong. So I grew up in that kind of environment. But I remember distinctly, because it's burned into my mind, that I had heard about. I'd first heard about Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Däniken, and this would have been in 1970, I believe, when that movie came out, and so I would have been 6 years old. The preacher was giving a sermon on blasphemy, and that movie happened to be this massive hit at the time. I mean, I can remember everybody talking about it, seeing the commercials on TV, but he did just enough description that I was absolutely sold. So everything, we play cowboys and Indians, or we play armies, or we play ancient astronauts. I mean, that was my thing. I love the whole concept. I love everything that I saw. So I found the book really, really early on, probably was 3rd grade, I believe, when I finally got the book. And of course I was amazed by it. And I put it down for a while and was trying to grow up and do whatnot. But I discovered, I was reading one of the UFO magazines or something, and I had read about Sitchin and the 12th planet. So I ended up getting a copy of that in 1980, 81. I was probably 16, 17 years old. And that changed everything. Because Von Daniken, in the movie and in the book, he talks about different places and he gives you examples. But by the time I had gotten to the 12th planet, I was a deep reader. I like footnotes. I like looking at the index and just digging into it. Just a voracious reader, reading books all the time. And this book to me was like a textbook because it was completely believable, just as believable as any of the other stuff. So I'm gonna go back just a little bit, because when I was about 6 or 7, no, when I was 12, I'm sorry, when I was 12, not Sitchin, when I was 12, I had a Sunday school teacher who told our preacher that I was asking questions and they were making her uncomfortable. So one Wednesday night after choir practice during a break, preacher said, "Hey, I want to talk to you." And he called me in and grabbed me by the arm very, very violently and flung me in the chair. And he said, "You sit down, boy, and you listen to me." He said, "Stop asking your stupid questions." He said, "Every time you ask one of those questions, you just prove to everyone that you have no faith." And, as I hear Sitchin talk about his moment, I know that moment as well. Because what do? You're a kid. You can't go, screw you, especially your preacher. You can't do that. So I had to kind of live with it. And I, and personally for me, I thought when I asked those questions to my Sunday school teacher, I'm reading all this stuff, this Sumerian stuff, and that Noah, that wasn't the right thing. It was way 2,000 years earlier than Noah that the flood happened, and yada, yada, yada. I thought I was doing a service, and I was the guy who, oh my God, we got to rewrite the Bible because Eric has just discovered something. But that's just not it. That was heresy. That was blasphemy. That was me saying things that was just completely crazy. In Alabama during that early 70s, I guess they could have probably sent me to Tuscaloosa, where the crazy house was, as we were told. But I became obsessed as well. It's not something that it just every day I'm thinking about it. But I left the church. I became a big fan of Martin Luther, so I joined the Lutheran Church. Martin Luther, if you haven't read much about him, he's like the greatest badass of all time. None of those Old Testament guys have anything on Martin Luther. He could outdrink you, he could outthink you, and he could nail some posters. So, very, very cool guy. That made me want to become a Lutheran. And then I just, the more I would research and the more that I did, and I traveled with an evangelist around the Panhandle of Florida. I played drums, he played piano and sang, and made a gospel album, and I did everything I could to find God, to find some sort of meaning. And it's not like I just had this little voice in the back of my head saying, "Hey, I don't think you're thinking right. This stuff doesn't make sense." It's just a lot of hours of contemplating, your mortality and how did we get here and where are we going? I mean, no one knows. But the things that I read in Zecharia Sitchin's books, they changed my way of thinking. They altered my thought process. And I'm forever grateful to him, because it gave us alternative ideals to contemplate. Who knows? Who knows? There's a lot of things in his books that just make way too much sense. But there's stuff in Glenn Beck's speeches that make a lot of sense. For a little, Sitchin has his books have remained relevant for all of these years, and I feel like I don't believe in callings, and I don't believe in all that stuff. I believe that things happen not for a reason, but I have a saying: no matter what happens, that's what's supposed to happen. I mean, that's just the kind of way it is. But I am compelled to finish this documentary and to research as much as I can to learn everything that I can learn about the man. Are people volunteering information? Yeah, a lot of people. I'm getting so much information from those Sitchinites, people who traveled with them. And just the other day, I drove down to Nashville and had lunch with William Henry from Ancient Aliens, and he does the Ascension program on Gaia Network, and a lot of different shows that he does. Extremely well-versed man. He's well-versed in mythology and art, and he told me this wonderful story. In fact, I'm going to try to get him on here, and I'll let him tell the story. I'm not going to tell the story, but it was one of those perfect little stories about Sitchin that just emphasizes his personality, because he was a quirky little guy, and he was hilarious. He was very dry wit. His humor very, very dry wit. He was a very loving man. He was very protective of copyrights and things like that. That's why I've been going crazy trying to find out who owns, certain pieces of video or some documents that I find. So, because I know he would do the same thing, and I don't complain about it, but what I'd really like to do, I'd really like to have someone who knows about those years, 1920 to 1940. There's one person that I know that knows that. That's Amnon Sitchin, his brother. And his brother just turned 90 years old last year. He was born in Palestine, and he became, I think he was an aeronautical engineer. He's the person who did a lot of the calculations for Sitchin in his book. But I spoke to him on a couple of occasions, and I understood he just didn't want to go back and revisit those times. He said, just let me be an old man and live out the rest of my life. And, of course I respect that. I mean, how can you not? But, it would really be nice just to know about, what the parents were doing, what Sitchin was doing at certain times in his life. And these things may be lost forever. There's a book out there, and that's all I'm going to say. It's not public, and I'm requesting that the family give me permission to read it. But it was published 50 copies, and only for the family. So I'm not family, but maybe there'll be a chance that I can sit down and read it. Someone would like to do that. Or the family may just not want that part of his life out. So I don't know. But either way, I try to respect their wishes. I would want the same. At the same time, nobody's, knocking on my door to know my dad's life story or my mother's life story. So it's a little different. There's not millions of fans out there. So one part of me says, look, this guy is a public, he's a part of us. He's a part of this great universe. He's helped to explain a lot of things to us. Therefore, I should know who he is. On another, he was also a very private man. And you may say, hey, that's it. Find what you can. Screw you. So I have gone through many newspapers, newspapers.com. Get a subscription to that, and you can search. And I have found, oh my gosh, so many articles on Sitchin, going all the way back to, I have his grades, honors, of course, at the London School of Economics, published in one of the Palestinian newspapers. So little things like that. Just a lot of. I want to ask one more thing. If you're watching this video, you have little tidbits, something about Sitchin that I don't know. Please contact me. Talk to me. If you have video, photos, anything that you would like to go into the documentary, I have zero budget. My wife and I are paying for this, and she's going to strangle me if I keep spending money, especially during this pandemic. But if you have anything that we could use, you would get credit in the documentary, and I give you a hug. I see you. And if you're watching this and you have questions about Sitchin, maybe not the writings, because that stuff's everywhere, but if you have specific questions to Zecharia and you'd like to ask them to me, I'll try to answer them. I just ask that you guys be nice on the Facebook page. It's terrible when you get a troll out there and all they want to do is say bad things. If you don't like the video, if you don't like Sitchin, if you don't believe Sitchin, turn the video off. Don't waste your time. It's just not worth it, and it aggravates everybody else. So that's just being honest. And why am I doing the documentary? Besides what I just told you, because no one else has done it, and it needs to be done. And I want to watch it because I'm a big fan. So the moral of the story, my story, Sitchin's story, you don't piss off little children when they're asking questions. They're trying to learn. And the last thing they need is you telling them they can't learn. Because that is what's wrong with the world. Thank you for joining in. Hit the subscribe button. There's links down at the bottom for the our Facebook group and their Twitter account, which I tweet every once in a while, and whatever else is in there. So, but again, thank you for joining in. Be safe and be smart, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much.